I knew something was wrong the second my wife screamed my name from the driveway like somebody had died. Because when I ran outside, she was standing beside my truck holding a phone I had never seen before, staring at me like I was the one hiding something. My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical. She lifted the phone a little and said, almost too calmly, "Do you want to tell me why this was under the passenger seat?" And I just stood there in the cold with my pulse hammering in my ears, because I had never seen that phone in my life. I said, "Emily, what are you talking about? That's not mine." She gave this bitter laugh that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it and said, "Right, because strange phones just appear in married men's cars now." In that moment, everything shifted. I was confused, then defensive, then weirdly ashamed, even though I had done nothing, because that is what she was good at. She could throw doubt into a room and make me feel guilty for breathing wrong. The worst part is that if this had happened a year earlier, I probably would have folded immediately and started apologizing just to calm her down. But by then I had already been living with this constant low-grade dread. Like my marriage had become a house with a gas leak and only I could smell it. Emily had been hiding her screen every time I walked by, sleeping with her phone face down under her pillow, disappearing for errands that somehow took 3 hours, then coming home irritated and icy like I was the inconvenience. Any time I asked simple questions, she turned it back on me so fast my head spun. "Why are you tracking me? Why are you so paranoid? Do you hear yourself right now?" She had this way of acting offended with such confidence that I started questioning my own instincts. And the thing that keeps replaying in my head now, like some kind of cruel joke I missed the first time, is this random night about 2 months earlier when my friend Jason was over at our place, sitting at our kitchen table like he had a permanent seat there, laughing too loudly at everything she said while I stood at the stove, pretending not to notice the way they kept exchanging these quick glances. At one point I joked, "Man, you're here more than I am." And Emily snapped back immediately, almost defensive. "So what? He's your best friend. Why does that bother you?" The tone caught me off guard back then, but I brushed it off, because trusting them felt easier than questioning them. Now it feels like I was standing in the middle of something obvious, and they both watched me choose not to see it. That night I finally picked up the mystery phone after she stormed inside and locked herself in our bedroom, and I told myself I was only doing it to prove she was wrong, to clear my own name, to stop feeling like I was losing my mind in my own house. The screen lit up without a password, and I swear my hands went cold before I even read a single word, like some part of me already knew my life was about to split into a before and after. The messages were open. There were hearts. There were late-night plans. There were photos I could not unsee. But it was not just that she had been cheating. It was not even that she had planted the phone in my truck to make me panic first, to put me on defense before I could ask my own questions. No, the thing that hollowed me out was the contact name at the top of the thread, because of all the men in the world, of all the possible betrayals I had braced myself for, I was not prepared to see the name of the one person I trusted enough to let into my home without knocking. I thought seeing his name was the worst part. I was wrong, because the moment I heard her unlock the bedroom door behind me, everything inside me went from shock to something darker, something sharper, like my body finally caught up to what my brain was trying to deny. I turned slowly, still holding the phone, and she froze when she saw it in my hand, but only for a second. Just a flicker, just enough to confirm that she knew exactly what I was looking at. Then her face hardened, like she had already decided what version of reality we were about to live in. I said his name out loud, and it didn't even sound like my voice anymore. It sounded hollow, disconnected, like I was listening to someone else's life collapse. "Jason?" I asked, even though I wasn't asking. I was begging for it not to be real. She didn't answer right away. She crossed her arms instead, leaned against the wall like I was inconveniencing her, and said, "You're really going through random phones now? That's where we are." And I just stared at her, because somehow she was still trying to make me feel like I was the one crossing a line. I remember saying, "Don't do that. Don't twist this. I can see it, Emily. I can literally see it. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone, and I kept scrolling like I was punishing myself, like every message was another confirmation that I had been living in something fake. And then she sighed, actually sighed, like I was exhausting her, and said, "You're taking things out of context." That sentence hit me harder than anything else, because it was so familiar. It was the same tactic, the same deflection she had used for months, just scaled up to something unforgivable. I laughed, but there was no humor in it, just disbelief bleeding out of me. Out of context? Late-night messages, meeting up, hiding it from me, that's out of context? And that's when she snapped. Not with guilt, not with remorse, but with irritation. Maybe if you weren't so distant all the time, I wouldn't have needed someone to actually talk to. That was the moment something inside me cracked in a way I don't think I can ever fully explain. Because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was replacement. She wasn't even denying it. She was justifying it. And the worst part is that for a split second, just a fraction of a second, I actually questioned myself. I thought about the nights I worked late, the times I was too tired to talk, the small ways I might have pulled away without realizing it. And she saw that hesitation in my face and stepped right into it. "See? You know it's true," she said quietly, almost gently now, like she was guiding me toward accepting blame that didn't belong to me. It was manipulation so smooth it almost worked. But then I scrolled further, and that's when everything got worse. Because buried between the messages, between the plans and the lies, there was a conversation from earlier that day, from just a few hours before she found that phone in my truck. And I felt my chest tighten as I read the words again and again, trying to make sense of them, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding. But I wasn't. I looked up at her slowly, my vision narrowing, and said, "You didn't just lie to me. You set this up." She didn't answer. She didn't even try to deny it this time. And in that silence, I realized something that made everything before it feel small. They weren't just hiding from me. They were planning around me. I thought the worst part was realizing she had chosen him over me. I was wrong. Because the moment I understood they had been planning things behind my back, not just hiding, not just reacting, but actually coordinating, something inside me shifted from heartbreak into something colder, something that felt like clarity wrapped in dread. I kept staring at that message thread, rereading the same lines like they might rearrange themselves into something less destructive. But they didn't. It was all there in plain words, casual and calculated, like I wasn't even a person in their world, just an obstacle to manage. I said quietly this time, "You put that phone in my truck, didn't you?" And even as the words left my mouth, I already knew the answer. She didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She just looked tired, like I had finally caught up to something she had been ahead of for a long time. "Why would I do that?" she asked. But her tone gave her away, because it wasn't confusion. It was delay. It was buying time. And I felt this strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes right before something breaks completely. I held up the phone slightly and said, "Because you needed me to find it. You needed me on the defensive. You needed me to look guilty before I could even question you." She shook her head immediately, stepping closer now, her voice sharpening. "That's insane. You hear yourself, right? You're creating this whole story because you don't want to admit you've been acting different." And there it was again. That same pattern, that same attempt to rewrite reality in real time, except now I could see it clearly, like watching a magician after you've learned the trick. It didn't confuse me anymore. It just made me feel sick. I don't even remember deciding to do it. But I opened another conversation on that phone, one I hadn't noticed at first because it was buried lower in the list. And the second I saw the contact name, my stomach twisted in a completely different way. It wasn't Jason. It wasn't some unknown number. It was someone else entirely, someone who had been in my life just as consistently, just as trusted, just as close. For a second, I thought maybe it was harmless, maybe it was unrelated, But then I read the messages, and that fragile hope collapsed instantly. The tone was different, but the secrecy wasn't, the familiarity wasn't. The kind of things you don't say unless there's something you're hiding. I looked up at her slowly, my voice quieter than it had been all night, but heavier, like every word carried weight now. "How long?" I asked. She blinked, just once, and I saw it again. That flicker, that calculation behind her eyes as she tried to figure out exactly what I had seen. "What are you talking about?" she replied, but it sounded weaker this time, less certain, like the ground under her version of reality was starting to crack. I swallowed hard and turned the screen toward her, not aggressively, not accusingly, just enough for her to see that I knew. "Not just Jason," I said. "So how long?" And for the first time that night, she didn't have an immediate answer. But the silence said enough. Because in that moment, I realized something even worse than betrayal, something I hadn't been prepared to face at all. I didn't actually know how many lies I was standing in anymore. I thought finding out there was more than one person would break me completely. I was wrong. Because what came next didn't feel like breaking. It felt like waking up into something I didn't recognize anymore. I stood there holding that phone, looking at her, and it hit me all at once that this wasn't chaos to her. This wasn't some mistake that spiraled out of control. This was structured, managed, controlled, and I was the only one who didn't know I was part of it. She finally exhaled, long and slow, like she was letting go of the effort of pretending, and ran a hand through her hair before looking at me again. This time without that sharp defensiveness, without the performance. "You're overreacting," she said. But it landed differently now, softer, almost rehearsed, like a line she had used too many times to still believe in. I shook my head immediately, my chest tightening. "No, don't do that again. Not now. Not after this." My voice cracked in a way I couldn't control, and I hated that she could still pull that out of me, even now. "You don't get to tell me what this is." For a moment, she just watched me, studying me like she was trying to decide how much to admit, how much to reshape, how much control she still had left in the situation. And then she said something that I don't think I will ever forget, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because of how calm it was. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. And I remember laughing again, that same hollow sound, because at that point I didn't even know what I thought anymore. "Then tell me," I said, "because I'm clearly missing something." And that's when she shifted tactics completely. She stepped closer, her voice lowering, almost gentle again, like she was trying to pull me back into something familiar, something easier to accept. "You've been checked out for months," she said. "You stopped seeing me. You stopped listening." I felt alone in my own marriage. Every word was carefully placed, not explosive, not defensive, but crafted, like she was building a version of reality that I could step into if I wanted relief from the one I was actually in. And I could feel it working, not fully, not like before, but enough to make me hesitate again, enough to make me question where exactly things had started to fall apart. But then something clicked, because I remembered that night again. Jason sitting at our table, her defending him so quickly, so sharply, like I had crossed a line just by joking about it. And then I remembered something else, something I hadn't paid attention to at the time because it felt too small to matter. The way she had gotten a message that night, glanced at it, and then immediately flipped her phone over when I walked past. And how, just seconds later, Jason's phone buzzed on the table. I felt my stomach drop all over again, like I was reliving the first moment, but worse this time, because now there was context. I looked at her slowly, my voice almost a whisper. "That night, when he was here," I started, and she froze just slightly, just enough to confirm I was getting close to something she didn't want me to reach. "You were messaging each other while I was in the same room, weren't you?" She didn't answer, and that silence told me more than any confession could have. But it still wasn't the worst part, because as I lowered my eyes back to the phone in my hand, I noticed something I had completely missed before, something that made my chest tighten in a way that felt almost suffocating. The contact name I thought I recognized wasn't saved the way it should have been. It wasn't just his name, it was labeled something else entirely. I thought I had already seen everything that could hurt me. I was wrong. Because the moment I looked closer at that contact name, it felt like the ground shifted again, like I had missed something even more deliberate hiding in plain sight. It wasn't saved as Jason. It wasn't even a nickname that made sense. It was saved as a woman's name, something casual, something forgettable, something I had seen pop up on her phone before without ever questioning it. And suddenly, every time she had said, "It's just her," every time she had dismissed my curiosity with that flat, annoyed tone, came rushing back all at once. I felt my throat tighten as I looked up at her, holding the phone out slightly like it weighed more than it should. "You didn't even bother to hide it well," I said quietly, but my voice was shaking anyway. "You just changed the name." She didn't respond immediately, but her eyes flickered, not with guilt, not with shame, but with irritation at being caught in something she thought was secure. "You're reaching," she said, too quickly, and that was all I needed. Because for the first time, I wasn't questioning myself anymore. I wasn't second-guessing what I was seeing. I knew, and the memories kept stacking up, one after another, forming something ugly and undeniable. All those times her phone lit up with that same name. All those moments she casually said she was talking to a friend. All those nights she stepped out of the room to take a call. It wasn't just deception. It was routine. It was built into our daily life so seamlessly that I had been living alongside it without realizing I was the only one not in on it. I shook my head slowly, more to myself than to her. "You made me feel crazy," I said, my voice lower now, steadier, but heavier with something I couldn't hold back anymore. "Every time I noticed something, every time I asked, you made me feel like I was imagining things." She crossed her arms again, that same defensive posture, but there was something thinner about it now, something less convincing. "Because you were," she shot back. "You still are. You're connecting things that aren't there because you want a reason to be upset." That word hit me harder than anything else. A reason. Like this was something I was searching for, something I needed to justify, instead of something she had created and carefully maintained. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep myself grounded, trying not to let the anger take over completely, because underneath it, there was something worse building, something heavier. "No," I said quietly. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." And then I scrolled again. Because at that point, it felt like I had to. Like stopping would somehow be worse than knowing everything. And that's when I found the messages that didn't fit the pattern. Short, direct, different tone. Not playful, not emotional, practical. I frowned, my eyes scanning the screen as my chest tightened again. But this time it wasn't just about betrayal. It was something else. Something colder. "Did he find it?" one message read. "Not yet," she had replied. I felt my hands go numb. Slowly, I looked up at her, my voice barely holding together. "This wasn't just about hiding," I said. "You were watching me." She didn't deny it. And in that moment, I realized something that made everything before it feel small. I wasn't just being lied to. I was being managed. I thought being lied to was the deepest level of betrayal. I was wrong. Because realizing I had been watched, anticipated, and controlled made everything else feel almost secondary, like the lies were just the surface of something much more calculated underneath. I stood there staring at that message. "Did he find it?" Over and over, like my brain was refusing to process what it actually meant. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This was planned. Every reaction I had, every question I asked, every doubt I expressed, they had been expecting it, preparing for it, maybe even guiding it. I looked at her, really looked this time, and it felt like I was seeing a stranger wearing a face I used to trust. You were testing me, I said slowly, my voice unsteady but controlled, like if I let it slip even a little, everything inside me would collapse. That phone, this whole thing, you wanted to see how I'd react. She didn't answer right away, but her silence didn't feel defensive anymore. It felt exposed, and that was worse, because it meant I was right. You don't understand, she said finally, and her tone shifted again. Softer, but not in a comforting way. More like she was trying to regain control of the narrative instead of denying it. Things have been off between us for a long time. I let out a quiet, disbelieving breath, shaking my head. So your solution was to set traps? To make me think I was the one doing something wrong? My voice cracked at the end, and I hated that it still mattered to me how she saw me, even now. She stepped closer again, careful, measured, like approaching something fragile. I needed to know where you stood, she said. You've been distant, secretive. I actually laughed at that, but it came out broken. Secretive? I repeated. Emily, you created an entire double life and you're calling me secretive? And for a moment, just a moment, her composure slipped. I saw irritation flash across her face, sharp and quick, like she was losing patience with me not falling into place the way I used to. But then she said something that made my chest tighten in a completely different way. You weren't supposed to see all of it, she admitted quietly. That sentence lingered in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I felt my stomach twist as I looked back down at the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen, because suddenly it didn't feel like I had uncovered the truth. It felt like I had only scratched the surface of something much bigger. All of what? I asked, barely above a whisper. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. There was more, not just more lies, not just more people, more structure, more planning, more things about my own life that I didn't know. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding again, but differently now, slower, heavier, like each beat carried weight. What else is there? I asked. And this time, I wasn't asking as her husband. I was asking like someone trying to understand how deep the deception really went. She looked at me, and for the first time all night, there was something close to uncertainty in her eyes. But it didn't last, because instead of answering me, she said something that made everything inside me go completely still. You should check your laptop. And just like that, whatever I thought this was, got worse. I thought I had reached the bottom of it. I was wrong, because the moment she told me to check my laptop, I felt something inside me drop in a way that had nothing to do with anger anymore. It was deeper than that, heavier, like I was about to uncover something that didn't just involve her lies, but my entire sense of reality. I didn't even respond. I just walked past her, slowly, like my body was moving on its own, while my mind was already racing ahead, trying to guess what I was about to find and failing every time. Sitting down at my laptop felt surreal, like I was stepping into someone else's life. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a second before I opened it, and I could feel her standing behind me, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I was aware of every small movement she made. I opened the screen, and for a split second, everything looked normal. My desktop, my files, my life, exactly where I left it. And then I noticed the browser. It was already open. Not just open, logged in. My chest tightened as I moved the cursor slowly, my hand trembling again despite everything I had already seen. What did you do? I asked quietly. But she didn't answer. Of course she didn't. She didn't need to anymore. The answers were right in front of me. It was my email. Except it wasn't just mine anymore. Folders I didn't recognize. Conversations I had never seen. Messages marked as read that I had never opened. My stomach dropped as I clicked into one, then another, and the realization hit me piece by piece, slow and suffocating. She had been inside my accounts, reading everything, watching everything. For how long? I didn't know. Weeks? Months? Longer? I kept scrolling, my breathing getting heavier, more uneven, as I saw threads forwarded, screenshots saved, things taken out of context and sent elsewhere. My private thoughts, my conversations with friends, my frustrations, my doubts, all of it exposed. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely holding together now. "Why would you do this?" And that's when she finally spoke, her voice calm again, almost disturbingly calm. "Because I needed to know if you were already doing the same thing to me." I turned slowly in my chair, staring at her like I didn't recognize her anymore. "So you broke into my life because you thought I might break into yours?" I said, and even to me it sounded unreal. "You were different," she replied. "Distant, careful, like you had something to hide." That word again. Hide. It echoed in my head as everything started connecting in ways I didn't want it to. The phone in my truck, the staged discovery, the messages, the monitoring. This wasn't just suspicion. This was a system. And then something hit me. Hard, fast, something so obvious I couldn't believe I had missed it until now. I turned back to the laptop, my heart pounding again as I opened another folder. One I had ignored at first because it didn't look important. But it was, because inside it were conversations. Not mine, not hers, but about me. I felt my breath catch as I read the first line, my entire body going cold. They weren't just watching me. They were discussing me, analyzing me. And the worst part, there was more than just the two of them involved. I thought nothing could shock me anymore. I was wrong. Because seeing those conversations, seeing myself reduced to a topic, a pattern, something to be observed and interpreted, broke something in me that I didn't even know was still holding on. I stared at the screen, reading words that felt like they didn't belong to my life, like I had somehow stepped into a version of reality where I wasn't a person, just a subject. "He's starting to notice. He's more reactive this week. Push a little, see how he responds." My chest tightened with every line, my mind trying to reject it, trying to find some explanation that made it less disturbing, but there wasn't one. I scrolled further, my hands numb now, detached, like they didn't belong to me anymore. There were timestamps going back months, different names in the thread. Not just Jason, not just her, others, people I recognized, people I had trusted. And suddenly all those small, uncomfortable moments I had brushed off, the odd looks, the strange comments, the times conversations felt like they had an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. They all came rushing back at once, fitting together into something that made me feel physically sick. "They knew," I said out loud, but it didn't even sound like a question. It sounded like a realization I couldn't undo. I turned slowly to look at her, my face probably pale, my voice barely holding together. "All of them. They knew." She didn't answer immediately, but this time her silence didn't feel calculated. It felt exposed in a different way, like she hadn't expected me to get this far, not this fast. "It wasn't like that," she said finally. But even as she said it, I could hear how empty it sounded. I shook my head immediately. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper now, cutting through whatever she was about to build. "Don't tell me what it wasn't. I can see what it is." My chest was rising and falling too fast now, my thoughts spiraling, trying to make sense of how my life had turned into something I didn't recognize at all. "You turned me into what? Some kind of experiment?" I asked, and there was something breaking in my voice now that I couldn't hold back anymore. "You didn't just lie to me. You didn't just betray me. You studied me." The word hung there, heavy and wrong. She stepped forward, like she wanted to fix it, like there was still something to fix. But I took a step back without even thinking, and that moment, that distance between us, it said more than anything else had all night. Because for the first time, I didn't just feel hurt. I felt disconnected. Completely. "I don't even know what's real anymore," I admitted quietly, and that was the truth that scared me the most. Not the cheating, not the lies, not even the planning. It was the fact that I had been living inside something constructed, carefully, deliberately, and I never saw it. I looked at her one last time, searching for something familiar, something that reminded me of the person I thought I married. But all I saw was someone I didn't understand anymore. And the worst part? As I stood there trying to process everything, one final thought settled in, slow and heavy. If they had been watching me this closely, then nothing I felt was ever just mine.